The world needs heroes. Individuals with the drive and talent to rise above all others, using sheer force of will to change what's possible. But at Swift, we know every success story has a team behind the scenes. Because for the last 50 years, we've been supporting your success stories, keeping the world connected across more than 200 countries, delivering with excellence built on trust, giving you the latest tools to make transactions instant and frictionless, helping value flow where it's needed, and innovating as technology and society changes. We're making finance a simple, seamless, and standardized part of our lives, and keeping complexity behind the scenes. So whatever your next challenge, we'll be here for you. Whether that's financing global enterprise or helping small businesses thrive. Because with best-in-class infrastructure, we are your support team, helping you achieve the heroics that move our industry forward. Swift, shaping the future of finance together.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you, and welcome to this live event, Supercharge Your Payments Business with ISO 20022. My name is Nicolas Stuckens. I'm with the ISO Adoption and Data Quality Central Team at Swift, based in Belgium. And today we'll be discussing the adoption of ISO 20022 by the industry. We'll be going through some of the lessons learned and focusing mostly on the benefits that the industry expects from ISO 20022. And to do that, I'm pleased to be joined by two senior industry experts, Ciarán Byrne, who's Head of Global Clearing Product and Transformation at JP Morgan, and Damien Godderis, Head of Payment Industry Engagement at BNP Paribas. Gentlemen, can you perhaps briefly describe the role that you play in the ISO 20022 transformation within your banks? Ciarán?
Sure. So thanks everybody. Great to be here today. So I have overall responsibility at JP Morgan for the implementation of the ISO 20022 program. I run our global clearing products and also our global industry groups. So I've had the honor and the pleasure and the challenge of running the ISO program for the last few years through planning, through kickoff, through March CBPR Plus, and through the number of market infrastructures we've gone through. Manage a kind of a global team and a global team of stakeholders from all aspects of the bank, driving towards, making ISO embedded into everything that we do at JP Morgan.
Damien?
Hi. Yes. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. So I'm in charge of the industry engagement team for cash management at BNP Paribas. So what does it mean? It's on one side, I'm looking at all the change in the industry, participating to different working group and making sure that BNP understand what is happening to the market, but also can present and defend their point of view in this different working group. And the second side of that is, of course, with all these input, making sure to define the strategy for payments on BNP Paribas side.
Right, thank you. So if we look at what happened last year, the industry started using ISO 20022 for payments in March 2023, where we've seen a number of market infrastructures move to ISO 20022. And at the same time, the cross-border element, the bank-to-bank space started also using ISO 20022 in what we call a coexistence format. And we saw a number of banks starting to use ISO 20022 in anger from day one. If we look today at the volume that we see on the network, we see, roughly speaking, 20% of these payment volumes have converted from the FIN legacy format to the ISO format. And if we include the market infrastructure side of things, overall, the adoption rate goes to 35%. And of course, we'll be expecting more this year with some major market infrastructure moving to ISO as well. Your institutions have been amongst the first ones to adopt the ISO format, and so why did you consider it important to be there, to be an early adopter, and how did you build a case internally? Maybe starting with you, Ciarán.
Yeah, so at JP Morgan, we made the decision to go native ISO from day one. So native ISO meaning that we will send all of our messages, unless instructed otherwise by a client, in MX format from March of 23, along with CHAPS and T2 as they went live. The decision was really threefold. Right? So first, from a technology perspective, we felt that it was the right time to start the process of upgrading the technology in order to be able to send, receive, and be really native ISO. We didn't want to have to rely on translators, or while we were in the interoperability period, have both messages running at the same time. The second was a risk-based decision. So obviously within an interoperability period, when you've got two different message types, there's fears of truncation, messages being cut off, messages being translated incorrectly. And the third was really a business decision. We really wanted to be the market leaders, and we wanted to start really embracing ISO so we can move the industry towards starting to realize the benefits that are there, the opportunities that come along with it, and really preparing, because even though there is the prolonged interoperability period, it's going to come quite quick, and you have a number of market infrastructures along the way. We've gone through, say, 10 individual market infrastructures and the CBPR Plus. We've got obviously a number on our roadmap, and I think the major one that's on everyone's mind right now is chips in April, which I think will have a significant impact. We've been working closely with our clients, really trying to be that trusted advisor to make sure they understand all the planning that goes into ISO, everything that needs to be done. And the way we approach it as an organization, I think it's really important not to think of this as a technical program or as an operational program. It's a complete transformation of how we do business. We kind of described it here as changing the wings of the plane while still in flight, right? Because you really have to change everything from how your customer service department talk to clients, how they think about what's a PAX versus an MT103, and they have to be really trained up to speak that new language. You need to have buy-in from your compliance teams, your operations teams. They can understand the new messages. All of the product organizations need to be fully bought into everything that's happening. So, but what was really important for me is that, one, I got organizational buy-in from the top of the house that this is something that we really want to invest in. The industry is moving this way, and we are going to see the benefits that come along with it. But it's quite a significant investment to do. And I would really encourage people to start thinking about this early. We are, as you said, around 20%. I think we want to do better as an industry to get those numbers higher, particularly after we go through the chips. And in reality, so I think I was looking at today, we're 451 business days away from the end of coexistence. So that's going to come quite quick, right? And I know there's a few market infrastructures in between. So I would really encourage making sure that you do think about this now. And I'm sure most people who are listening today are on the journey somewhere. The key things that I would say that are really important are organizational buy-in, the global governance structure, and three is testing. So you cannot underestimate the amount of testing that needs to be done for this. And every market infrastructure has their own testing guidelines, but we found that it's very important to also think about buddy bank testing, to think about testing outside of that, typical days of data, determining what they would look like. I think at this stage, a lot of what I would call nearly the kinks in the market, we've started to really iron out and find out what some of those teething issues as we went through implementations were. But regardless, there's probably still going to be some issues that will arise as you go through this. So we're really encouraging people to do this as early as they can to make sure they're fully prepared and not leave it till the last minute.
Damien, what about you?
Well, the approach was similar. I think we are really at a turning moment for the industry. It's a massive change we have not seen for, I think, for more than 30 years. And for BNP, similar to JP Morgan point of view, we want it to be native ISO because it's an industry change, and you don't do it for 1 or 2 years. It becomes the new norm. So you need to really make sure that your chain end to end is capable of treating these new message. So the approach we take to build the business case is combine this ISO migration with our platform renewal. So we are migrating our entities to a new platform, centralized with all the benefits that everybody knows about centralizing this kind of processing. And the approach we took is we didn't want to do a big bang because migrating all the country in one shot take a lot of risk and bring little value. So we took an approach of combining the migration of the country on CBPR Plus with the migration of the market infrastructure to make sure that end to end those flows process, for example, in euro, can be sent end to end in ISO without truncation on the BNP side. So this is our current roadmap. We migrate last weekend another European countries, and since it's done, that country is not only sending ISO message to the market infrastructure, but also over CBPR Plus. So to make sure that when they do it, they are completely ISO. And also, if you want to build a business case, you need not only to speak about the technical migration, but about the benefits. And that's something we will develop further on. But why I want to say that is the native part is very crucial in this migration. We could have done way more countries and perhaps be close to the 100% ISO message sent and received sent by BNP Paribas, but then we would have to use translation. And that's something we wanted to avoid. When an entity of BNP is sending ISO message, then they are capable of processing it natively. And that was really key in our analysis and in our strategy to this ISO migration.
Indeed. And maybe let's look at some of the lessons learned, because you said it. I think the industry has been using the FIN format for over 40 years. So adopting the new format is obviously not a small change for the organization. I think, Ciarán, you said this is not an IT project. It really impacts every part of the organization, every stream, people, systems, and so on. But both of you represent leading transaction banks, which has a footprint, around the world. You have grown by acquisition over the past couple of years. So that means that there is a variety of different systems across the organization. So this type of project is absolutely massive. Can you share some of the lessons learned that you've faced throughout this adoption?
Sure, and I can jump in. So I think some of the things that were really important to us, like you talked about the technical nature of the change. Like for us, we changed over 130 applications in one weekend, and the coordination that goes into that and the planning is just unbelievably paramount. We had over 45,000 different test scripts that we were running on a PVT side, on a regression side, and it's just like a real generational change that was going in place that takes such significant planning. I think some of the lessons that we really learned is, so we set up command centers as we were going live in every market infrastructure with senior engagement and senior buy-in and all the key decision makers for any fallback that we may need to do, any fall forward. We had specially trained team of operation focused on any change to straight through processing, any payments that are hitting repairs for any reason. And I think a real important note is, I touched on this earlier, but all of our client-facing teams, we really ensured that they were fully conversant on ISO. The last thing I wanted was a client asking, I'm trying to determine the status of my PAX 9, and a client service asking, oh, what's a PAX 9? I really wanted to make sure the whole organization was fluent in ISO, because it is a new language, as we call it, and that means new terminology. But I would say that some of the real benefits around having the command center with the key decision makers there, having all aspects of the business brought in. And then on the technical side, so we actually released, and it's on the JP Morgan website, if anybody wanted to look at it, what was a lessons learned document. So ISO quite unique with all the banks in that we all want to succeed together as an industry. We want everybody to really embrace ISO. So what started out was a 500-page document of every single lesson learned we've had over the first 120 days of go live. So things as small as when ampersands are included, some of the issues that caused, if addresses were left blank and not provided, was automatically input, translating from one market infrastructure to the other and how that looks. I think it's certainly a real challenge. But as I said, all of those issues have really been worked out now, and not only us. So there were some great papers released by Swift and EY, by BAF now this week, and everyone's looking to share as much information as possible to make sure that everybody succeeds. Right? We want to make sure that we're all going along with the goals of ensuring that payments are fast, frictionless, efficient, transparent, and I think by really embracing ISO, it gets us closer to that and gets us more capabilities in order to ensure we're all working towards that same goal.
And I think you're right. And from BNP side, I think one items I wanted to highlight is, like you mentioned, the BAFT has released a paper on the lesson learned, and we were very happy to participate to that. And I found it interesting that they split it in 5 categories: the high-level governance, the data strategy and adoption of the data, the business phasing strategy, testing and validation strategy, and the ISO 20022 post-implementation and evolution. So very interesting look at it. But I wanted to focus on one aspect of this. For me, that's often underestimated is the testing and validation strategy. I think all these is key. And I saw with even such massive program, a tendency to test isolated in silo. And they believe that by testing in silo, you make it end to end. But I think first, do the end-to-end testing within your own organization, leverage on your other entities to even do cross entities flows, but also make sure to leverage as much as possible on the dress rehearsal offered by the market infrastructure, the capabilities to do penny testing with your counterparty, because it's key that you test it end to end. You are not the only one changing. The industry is changing. Your counterparty is changing. So if you want to limit as much as possible the impact on your client, make sure that you test end to end. And banks are there. We receive requests on a regular basis. We try to support as much as possible because we also are doing the same when we migrate with a new country. So it's very important, and you make it right here. It's a community change, and so we want to succeed as a community for such massive changes.
Okay, I think well, let's add on that quickly. Sorry, I think that the testing point is so key, and I really can't emphasize it enough. But the other thing that I would say is, I mean, you could have your whole organization testing between now and November 2025, every single type of payment type, but there's still going to be some issues that are unforeseen, right? So that's why we really think that it makes sense to migrate as early as possible, because if you're trying to solve and work out some of those issues in November of 25, it's going to be a lot more challenging than if you were getting them out of the way now.
Yeah. And as you both pointed out, there's a lot of very valuable resources published on the internet. The JP Morgan paper, the BAFT paper, the PMPG also produce a lot of very useful guidance in terms of adoption of the new data element and things to look for in the ISO 20022 adoption. So I would really encourage you to try to look at these if you struggle. Let's focus a little bit about the benefits. So last year, indeed, we published a paper with the EY, an ebook called Supercharge Your Payment with ISO 20022, where we describe a number of benefits for the industry in terms of efficiency benefits, in terms of running the bank, but also potential future benefits in terms of growing the business. Now, obviously, it's still early days, but could you describe some of the benefits that you've already experienced as an organization?
Yeah, I can start if you want. So I think with the ISO migration, you have more data, but it's not only just more data; it's structured data, and I think that's where you need to look at it. So it's the early days, but we already see some benefits. So some on the STP, because you are capable to pass information in the correct field. So that's one key element. Secondly, with, like I said, the market infrastructure that are also migrating to ISO, you avoid any translation. So that's really helping to make sure that the data is bring from the customer to the beneficiary. And also, not only on the STP part, but also when there is an investigation on a payment, by having the data structure, you are capable to isolate the elements you need to look at. So it allows you to be more efficient even when it's a manual intervention. So that's why, even if you are saying we are on the early days, we already see improvement in our processing. And a second element that come with the ISO migration is all the works that the community and Swift has done with Transaction Manager, because we are not only changing the format, but we are also bringing value with changing. So the data integrity, making sure that even if the payment is translated during the processing, Transaction Manager is capable of bringing it back, bring a lot of value, because before this data, when there was a translation, were lost. So now you are sure that even if someone in the change is touching data or truncating data, they are put back in the payment. So that's great added value, and that's reason why you should not wait the end of the coexistence to migrate. You can already benefit from that. No.
Yeah, it's spot on, and I see it as really two things, right? So it's the syntax and the semantics is how I kind of think about it. So the syntax is the structure of the data, and the semantics then being the meaning behind the data. Similar to yourself, Damien, we've started to see some of those benefits, and I really see it as threefold, right? So one, I think it's what I'd nearly call the operational resiliency and stability. That's everything from compliance, sanction screening, straight through processing rates. And we've already started to see an uptick and a benefit in some of them, reduction in false positives by having things structured correctly. It makes such a difference, and really moving away from free format fields where we see anything from a name to 35 characters of gibberish. So really having the structure there is going to be a huge benefit on the operational side. The second one I see is on the product enhancements, so something that we're really starting to dig into now. So some of the things we're thinking about are like accounts receivables matching, virtual accounts, real-time dashboards, and like post-trade communication services as something that we can think about our products as a whole across the organization and how ISO will have the ability to enhance them. And then the third is going to be really a little bit more in the theoretical space. Right? We always hear that the concept that data is the new oil. If that's the case, I really see gas or ISO as gasoline that's really going to set it alight. Right? We're thinking about everything from how do we better understand our clients' behavior, help them make better decisions, co-create services, solutions with them, with everything from really understanding the underlying data, and that could be anything from trends across countries, zip codes, states. And I think one thing that I find really interesting is going to be things like the purpose of payment category. The more we can really understand about payments and why our clients are doing business with us, what type of flows they're doing, the better service we'll be able to offer them, the better communication we'll have, and the better insights we'll have into the types of payments they're doing and how we can help them with that. I think we're nearly on that 12-month period from March where I think the Swift guidance was let's not use a ton of enriched data to start with, and that's probably what we're seeing right now. So in reality, it's a PAX 8 or a PAX 9 is quite similar information, just structured differently from what we would see in a 103 or a 202 previously. But when we get to a state of full adoption and everybody using the fields correctly, starting to understand them more, right, I think there's going to be a huge amount of ubiquity across the world and how we think about payments. But two, so much opportunities to really understand everything that we can do with that data. And I think that's what's kind of most exciting for us here at JP Morgan.
And perhaps just one additional element that in the coming added value, and it's the interoperability with local scheme and instant scheme. Because if you want to be in an instant and frictionless payment, international payments, you cannot waste time in translation. So it's key, and we already see, I think, the adoption of the OCT scheme in Europe can only work if the input from the sender is ISO native. Else it will not bring the value. It will be delayed. It will cause reject and so on. So it's really also opening the door to other route for the payment. So it's also a very important topic, and that you can start to benefit as of now.
Great. Good to hear. And I was going to ask if the, we often hear that the benefits are only for compliance, but you've clearly demonstrated this is not the case, that there are many, many more benefits to achieve than financial crime, which is another benefit. So obviously, ultimately, the ISO adoption is an enabler for better data quality and, richer data, but it's really down to the organization to use that to its full extent to leverage some of the benefits. So maybe we have a couple of questions from the audience. We have a question from Rafsel, and he's asking, by how much do you expect processing times to decrease with ISO 20022, and what are some expected data quality metrics? If any of you want to venture or take a shot at that.
So I think, right, if we think about how we process payments today, right, I think we have an incredibly high straight-through processing rate. Right? We're above 99% in terms of where we are. And I look at the SWIFT metrics, most payments are settled in less than 1 minute or less than 2 minutes, where there's no friction in the payment. I think where the benefit are going to be, what I touched on, is that false positives. So instead of picking up a sanctioned word in field 70 or field 72, that's now going to be structured into, that's a product type, or that's a product description, that's a surname, as opposed to a sanctioned name. So what we'll see is a significant reduction in those false positives, where they either have to be reviewed by AI or by an operator in a lot of cases and determine whether something's valid. I think when we get to the nirvana state of inquiries, investigations with PAX4s and everything else all being kind of operated effectively, I think we'll see the whole ecosystem of payments speed up in general, right, for returns, for everything else. But I think the real benefit will be around that reduction in manual reviews and payments that need to be reviewed manually to make sure that they have the correct data there.
I think it's a valid point, because on top of just the processing of the payment, the ISO migration will also take into account the inquiry and investigation message, the reporting. So when you use structured data, you can not only pass the information in a structured way, but you can also put a lot of automation, and that's also something that you will see changing on the inquiry and investigation. It's all the capabilities that we will be able to build to directly respond, do smart routing on this investigation message, because they are structured and they can retrieve the data from the underlying payment. So that's all this area where you will clearly see a significantly increase of the time.
Good. We have another question from Paul. He's asking, could the panel share their experience or approach when it came to sending payment messages to their correspondent or Nostro agents?
Yeah, so for our correspondent and agents, we obviously work very closely in planning, one, to determine their readiness, and we did send out communications that we will, as I said, be going native ISO, right? So where it made sense, we done pre-testing with them. We obviously encourage, and I think it's a great tool, Swift sparring partner tool, to make sure that all of our correspondent and Nostros were using it. But I think just really making sure that, one, they're ready, they know that we'll be resending in MX format, and they'll be receiving. I think one thing we're starting to think about now is CAMT and what that rollout's going to look like, and how we'll start working with our Nostros and our correspondent banking agents on that. So it's just all about planning and readiness, in my view.
I would just add, making sure they are involved and in the discussion. Don't start sending to them without having informed them, without having doing some penny tests. It's really the approach we have done, and that has demonstrated a really good success.
Right, and a question from Stephen. We need to migrate payment instructions, reporting messages, charges, and so on. Do you address them all in parallel or sequentially? What's your advice here?
I can start, and no, Ciarán, you also have a point of view on that. For us, you need all of these area to be migrated to get the full value, but doing everything at the same time bring a huge risk of not finishing it. So for us on BNP side, at this moment, we are really focusing on the payments initiation, so all the packs and paying for the corporate initiation, and then we will focus on the CAMT reporting and the investigation. And I think we already have seen that investigation message are now mentioned in my standard for 26. So I think there is already some action taken to phase it, and I think it's really key if we want to make sure that by November 25 all the payments are processed in ISO and not anymore in MT over CBPR plus.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Damien, and the similar approach that we've taken. I think the key thing that we want to focus on right now, and where we've seen demand from our clients, is on the PAX 8 and PAX 9 and the Payne V9, as you said, for the corporate initiation. I think the approach we've taken is we want to see a much higher volume of payment initiation before we start thinking about CAMT. In my view, there's not a big benefit of sending reporting on an MT message in MX format. So I want all the messages to be in MX before we start rolling out the reporting. And then just the pure scale of the change as well, as everybody who's going through this, it's a very, very significant. And I think, as Damien said, a slightly phased approach has worked for us. And I know some people have taken a different approach, but we really want to focus on the payments aspect first. I see the benefit of all. And when we get to that state of having payments reporting and inquiry investigation is where we're all driving towards. But in my view, taking a more phased approach and really focusing on the payments as the primary implementation, there's benefits that will come from that, and it gives you time to resource effectively, test effectively, and work from an operations perspective to make sure you're getting everything right.
Right. So before we close, can you share one final advice for the audience, please? Who wants to go first?
You want to go first, Damien? And I'll just copy whatever you say.
No, so I think we mentioned it a couple of times during the session, but November 25 is tomorrow. So better to start now, if not yet done. Involve your counterparty. Make sure that within your institution, but also outside, everybody is aware and it's involved. And yeah, it's the new norm. So make sure you do it in a native approach. That's for us very, very important.
Yeah, it's really the message that the time is now. So it's a minimum of 18 months to really run any sort of market infrastructure. Everyone working within the financial service industry will have gone through some degree of market infrastructures previously, but I would suggest not leaving this until November. I want people to start thinking about chips as a real catalyst to move towards native. And as Damien mentioned, right, if you're just relying on translators and translating back into your legacy infrastructure, it's going to be challenging, right? You want your technology, your infrastructure to be able to speak, understand the ISO language, so you can get those benefits. Work with your partners, use the information that's available in the industry. I think I've never seen more engagement around a topic in finance before. Perhaps AI and ML, which is the hot topic right now, but ISO seems to be what everybody is so interested in. And there's a wealth of information out there. Please use it. Work with your banks where it makes sense. Do as much testing as possible. And then the final thing I would say is really make sure you have organizational buy-in at the top of the house, that they understand the implication of the changes that you're making, and they're supportive, and they'll give you the resources that you need to get it done.
All right. Well, let me try to quickly summarize the key takeaways from this conversation. One, start early. There's a very steep learning curve. You absolutely need to start now. Test, and test again. You can never test too much. It is not just an IT project. It cuts across the entire organization, including your correspondent, your customers. We need to have the organization buy-in here. We are past the point of inflection. It's not a question about whether this is going to happen. It's a question of do it now. November 25 is at our doorstep. All of the largest currencies in the world will be or are already on ISO 20022. You should focus on your payment instructions first. Everything else follow through from there. And you should work towards being ISO native. Do not rely on translation tool or make very moderate use of them in a transition state. So with that, I want to thank you, Damien and Ciarán, for your valuable insights. I hope the audience found this extremely interesting, and we'll see you soon. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.